show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this show, and I've known you in the struggle for quite a long time. In fact, I think I knew you for about 10 years just online before I ever met you. And at the time you were doing in the media in Germany. So I used to know, and my idea of the time was that you were doing computers and you were doing videos. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, so basically the core idea was just to give activists an opportunity to express themselves and put their message out, which the mainstream media was not interested in. So that was just the core. We just had to build technology that would allow that to happen.
Okay.
So, and since internet had just emerged on the scene and quite a lot more people had access to internet, then the internet became the vehicle through which we were able to reach other people so we could spread the message that activists had to convey, which the mainstream media was not quite interested in, or was more interested in taming down some of the critiques of social issues and political issues around the world.
Okay.
So that's what it was all about.
You know, when you say that, I'm thinking of underground movies that filmmakers used to make with Super 8 and put them out there to communicate the same thing.
That is so correct, because the entire indie media movement, which is a short way to say independent media, even though it focuses on media democracy, it all has its roots in independent film.
Okay.
Right? Independent film had developed when the film technology was in its roots, and this, as with the emergence of the internet, we basically took some of these ideas to spread them out a lot more, so that more people could access independent films, which most of the time tackled mostly social, political issues and issues concerning people's rights.
Okay. I can tell you where I'm feeling lucky here, or Ambazonia should be feeling lucky, because basically you're a technology guy who also was interested in the struggle for the liberation of Ambazonia, because you're a citizen from Ambazonia.
That's correct.
And where are you from, by the way?
I'm from Manfe. My dad is from Manyemen. My mom is from Manu, from Manfe, and I grew up in Victoria and in Kumba, where my paternal family is set up. But I went to school in Manfe for a while in Boya, but mostly I rounded up my concluding years at GHS Manfe.
Okay.
And that was where I got my test of my first experience of being on the one hand, I grew up there, so I went to school, grew up there most of my age as a teenager, but that was also the place where I got my first test of the experience of being involved in the struggle. At the time the SDF was launched, I was a student at GHS, and that was my first ability to openly stand up to the system without fright. There was tension, there was fear, but it was the first massive public response to the system. That was the SDF launch protest in Manfe.
I'm getting interested. What was your motivation? Because I'm only asking that because it's not everybody who goes out to march.
That is correct. So, in my time when I grew up, and I think that was the experience of a lot of people, you knew there was something wrong. So you grew up and you knew that everybody out there that had authority and power was from La Republique du Cameroun or came across like being from there. The gendarmes spoke French and English, the DO spoke French and English, everybody that had power or authority was French or spoke French. And so
when you say that, I'm smiling because even our own people who are recruited come back and talk to us in French.
That is correct.
Because French is the language of power, the language of influence, whatever, the superior language.
That is correct. And of course, being a student in a boarding school meant that you sit, and while you were junior students growing up here, the senior students, of course, automatically discussing the issues, the political issues, the possibilities, how the country used to look before the situation got to where it was. And so there was that pressure, you lived in a country where on the one hand the government controlled the whole media, and on the other hand you had this history, this very rich history of the possibilities that used to be in Ambazonia in terms of public participation, and you were constantly being reminded by the leadership, especially like a young student growing up, that it used to be better than this. People used to participate, people were involved in elections and all of that. And so when the SDF was launched in Bamenda, despite the violence response of the regime there, people felt like, okay, we've had it, this is the time that we could get a breakthrough. And in Manfe, of course, the students at GHS Manfe also prepared the launch of the SDF like a protest situation.
Oh, it was launched. And so in Manfi, it was launched.
In Manfi, it was student-led protest.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. And so that was there's a feeling, there's a very weird feeling when you're out there standing in front of an oppressor that has guns and everything, but on the other hand, you see they kind of can't. They have their guns, but they just looked helpless. I mean, the captain walked up to the students and said, "You need to get home quickly before." And students were like, "No, we're not going nowhere. We have to protest. We have to march to go there and there." And it was a very emboldening experience, having grown up in a country where the government controlled all radio, all TV. In fact, before the TV even got there, and so there was something different. You understood everybody. And of course, you have to remember that happened just a few years after we had watched the dictatorship in Eastern Europe fall. Mm-hmm. And of course, all of us knew about
that
Mobutu.
Was the wind of change.
Exactly. And all of us knew about Mobutu, how powerful and strong he was, the lion of Zaire and everything, of Africa, everything. He called himself, and we watched Mobutu on TV crying with the arrival of democracy in Congo. Mm-hmm. So that there was true when people said there was air of, the wind of change. It was real. It was real. And so that was the beginning of my experience. Of course, things would evolve further, and when I would end up in Germany, it was just natural that I would gravitate towards the kind of groups and eventually the kind of technology that facilitated less empowered communities, less empowered people to be able to express themselves.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So while you were going there, it's your experience from home that was directing you that these are the little things that
is very correct.
Yeah, you know what? Most Africans who are thinking ahead, when they study the subjects they do, they usually study and think about not specializing in one thing. You have to have a more holistic approach to whatever you're studying. When I did film, I didn't only study filmmaking, I also studied directing, I studied acting, I studied lighting. I did everything because if I were to go home and I want to be a filmmaker, that I may not have these other complementary skills to use.
That is so true.
So I can see how you can go out there as an activist and you're thinking, oh, I now need to get into these technologies, which amazingly is becoming handy because obviously from Germany you moved to the United States.
That's correct.
You're a PhD student now in
scientific computation.
In scientific computation.
That's correct.
So you've gotten very deep into the technology, and as an activist, I'm sure you've just been watching what has been happening home. Have you been following closely?
Man. Oh yes, I have been following very closely. You can imagine what it feels like having grown up in that territory, knowing when you're out here, you get to understand a lot more how the world works, because you have a lot more exposure to information that in the territory you can't get access to. Not only is it not available where it's available, even there are certain books, for example, that if you're out of the country, it would not be any issue for you to buy and read. But in the territory, if you had those books, you were in trouble for having those books. And so it's just amazing to watch the, resilience of our people. It makes you very proud. I remember every time I walk into a room and most people ask me, "Oh, you have an accent. Where do you come from?" And I'm like, "I'm from Ambazonia." They're like, "Amba what?" I'm like, people call that Cameroon, but the locals like to call it Ambazonia. They're like, "Oh, Cameroon, we know, we've heard about that." I'm like, but then the conversation goes along that line. But recently, after what happened, right, this total, straight, chest up, stand up, we are humans and we're not going to let you dehumanize us through the threat of violence of our public. It makes you very proud because
let me tell you that the struggle for our struggle has never really it was always present in the diaspora. Yes. In the United States, it was always present.
Yes.
But I can tell you that around 2008, all the activists were getting tired, and so between 2008 and 2015, the activism was really coming down. But that's when suddenly the ground picked it up.
Yes, and you watch that defiance. You watch these people standing up. They were not, they were. You watch people, all these marches, all this singing, carrying the remains of some other victim that has just fallen to the regime. You would expect, I guess the regime had been expecting that we shoot one student, everybody will run into their own hole and hide for themselves.
And that was the intention, yes.
That was the intention, but
Yes.
people stood up, and you suddenly realize this is history. This is the moment. This is that time when, you know, people would look back and be like, how did you respond to this beyond just being excited and proud to go out and boast that you come from this territory? How did you interface with that?
Yes,
So, yeah.
I think people just had enough because I think the French and La République just kept reaching, and people have really described it that they were actually trying to extinguish us. They were not trying to colonize us. They were not trying to assimilate us. They were trying to extinguish us from our territory.
I totally agree with that.
Let me expand a little bit on this.
Sure.
Because if you notice, they were not giving our people jobs. They were not training them in the professional schools. I remember it was so hard for any of our students to go to Q's or to the polytechnics and the professional schools. In fact, just recently, meaning this 2017, I think there was a list that was published about admittance into the School of Sports in Bamenda. I can't remember what the local name is. Mm-hmm. And I heard out of 300 students, I can't remember if it's 2 or 12 that were Anglophones. The rest were Francophones. So you look at it. So they were not trying. You call Bamenda. The phone system answers in French, all the administration in French. You go to a Yaba hotel, 95% of the employees there are French speaking. So it looks like they were trying to replace us in our land. You go to the businesses, I hear that building material businesses in Bamenda are all by Bamileke people or Francophones, the petroleum gas stations. So all the businesses, they were taking them over and replacing us.
Yes.
All the administrators.
Yes.
All of them,
yeah.
Francophones. And so they were not, so I think they just kept reaching until they reached the bone and the people hit the wall and they had no other choice but to fight back.
I totally agree with that description of the situation. Think about it. I talked to a German doctor who was based there in Manyemen, right, in 2005. She has no beef in this, no bone in this fight, as you call it, right? Mm-hmm. She explained to me that the government was telling them to stop telling the public that HIV was the most deadly disease in the environment. And the government's argument was that they don't want them to scare the people. And this is a German doctor trying to help out. And she said, not me forcing her, but her reflection was that was just a terrible disaster. I mean...
I'm going to tell you a little secret.
Sure.
I have Frundi on tape saying that when soldiers are infected with HIV,
yes,
they transfer them to the Southern Cameroons.
Okay.
And then they give them money and they infect the population.
Think about
and that, I'll just need to finish it, and I have the tape.
Yeah.
And that he made a presentation here, and that's I recorded it, and that's he had it on tape. And that when he is talking to a population of that, he went and visited some nuns, and the nuns were telling him that 80% of the population is infected. And so he was saying that when he's talking to a population of 5,000 people, he's seeing 80% of them dead walking.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised by that story.
Yeah,
because like I said, Frundi collaborated it, and I have it on tape.
There you go. Now just think about that for one moment, what that means. This is a systematic, you were talking about wiping people out?
Yes.
I mean, how bad can it get? I mean, how ugly can it get for a regime to implement a policy like that? You know, and that is why, you know, to see our people stand up this way and, you know, to think about where we are historically as a people, it almost seems to me like it is our last gasp that the enemy thought this would be it before it, and it's also our possibility to get out of our sick bed and stand up for ourselves. And
there was something else I was talking to you off camera and you were mentioning, and I remember you saying that the population of the Southern Cameroons in 1960 was
about 1/3. the equivalent of the entire population. That's
yes,
correct.
And then suddenly
Cameroon up to today keeps repeating that we just 20% of the population. That's the narrative that the Cameroon government. If you listen to all of their ministers when they get on the radio or the TV, especially with foreign governments, when they're at foreign media outlets, the first thing they say, they are just 20% of the population. We cannot form policy just for 20%. That is a tactic that has been used colonially forever.
No, I think we should give the number. I think in 1960,
yes,
we were 800,000. And La Republique was 3 million or something like that.
That's correct. That's correct.
So does it mean their population has been growing and the population of Southern Cameroon has not been growing?
You can ask why would that be that way, right? Whichever way you look at it, logically.
These numbers we're quoting, these are numbers that were used for budgeting in 1960.
That is correct.
1961.
That is correct, and that's one of the things I tell other activists. The first challenge you challenge when they say, Ambazonians are just 20%. There's a reason they're saying that. They're not saying that just because they think that they just need to put numbers on the table. No, that is how the elections in Nigeria were rigged by the British for Tafawa Balewa to be president. Because if you don't know the number of people you have in your population, in your sector, electoral district, if they tell you that you're just 5 of you, right? And then they stuff the ballot box with 20 other extra people, you lose. You don't know why, but you lose still.
So our population is not 20%.
It is not. It cannot
because
be.
They have to explain.
They have somebody
have to explain
what happened.
Yes.
What have they done to us for us to be that dramatically lesser than them? It's not like there's any more. What happened to us?
Yes.
What would have been that thing that stopped our population from growing? Of course, they have taken all kinds of measures, like you were explaining. Frundi talking about their deliberate attempt to infest our populations with AIDS, which is very scary to think about it. I don't think I've heard anything that recently in any country. Of course, we heard it in the past.
Hey, I'm calling on TV. It's John Frundi who said that. We have the tape.
Thank you.
And if you ask him, I don't think he's going to deny it.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. So that's the first thing we need to do. We need to push back on that number issue.
Yeah.
Because it's a game, right? It's a game.
Yes.
So if you're not from the territory, if you're from some European country, they say to you, oh yeah, it's just 20% of the population that's making all this and you're like, that is a part of the game. We have to push back, like, excuse me, it's not about percentage, but even if it were about percentage, it's not 20.
Yeah, let me say another thing, okay? I don't deal in conspiracy theories.
That is correct.
Sometimes when I look at the map, it looks like, it was said for a long time that Europeans used to draw African maps and make Africa smaller than Africa actually is.
They did. It's a fact.
So I think sometimes they misrepresent the landmass of Southern Cameroons just because they have these devilish intentions of keep minimizing us in order to wipe us out, but we're not going anywhere.
No.
And I think that what happened early
Recently,
this year, it's an awakening call that if they can manipulate their citizens, we came in with a different education. We're totally different people, and we can take time to understand what's going on, but we're definitely not dumb, and we're definitely not cowards.
Of course not.
And I think our people have proven that.
They have.
So let's move forward. So our people revolt. They bring in guns. They were not scared. They killed some. They were not scared. Instead, what they did was they took their phones and they took pictures and sent the messages out for the first time.
Yes.
For the first time in our history, we had the power to actually start telling our own stories. And in this case, we're telling them the most dramatic
Evidence.
way.
Correct.
We're telling them the most dramatic way.
Yeah.
And so, with the guns and the I'm looking for a good name because I don't want to call them security forces because they are insecurity forces. And they came in and terrorized everybody. We provided evidence to the world.
Yes.
Then they shut off the internet.
Yes, and that was like so. Like you were saying, I've been dabbling in technology for quite a while now. So you could imagine my immediate response when that happened.
I was going to ask how did you feel?
Thank you. When that happened, it was like, whoa, of course you were excited with the fact that you're trying to reach out to the territory to find out what role you can play in all this, what's going on. But when they shut the internet, that was immediately my immediate network of friends, right? It was like, okay, I remember somebody from Morris had written an email, Morris, which is part of the coalition of activists based here that were very central, involved in the US in organizing the response to support the struggle back home, had written an email to an organization called the Association for Progressive Communication, which focused on trying to bring internet to communities that don't have internet. And so then here you have a situation where the argument has always been we don't have money to provide internet for everybody, but here's a place where the people have internet and some government cut it out.
Yeah, shutting it out.
Suddenly it made enemies that they probably did not imagine that were in the woodworks. And they were like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, they sent me the email because I had worked with them in the past in other projects for the UN FAO and AMAC. So those connections helped me they sent the email like, do you know this guy? I'm like, I don't know him, but I know the struggle. This is our struggle. I've been telling you people for years. But what I did in that response email also was, instead of just writing the email, I said, the reason you're getting this email is because of this. And in that email, I included one of those videos that were coming from home about where the student is being beaten and her head dropped in the mud.
Yes, the girl at the University of Boya.
Exactly. So I included that video in like a link, the link of that video luckily posted by our people from home, in that my response to APC. And the APC, their response to me was, this video is troubling. This is really troubling. I mean, think about it. This is a big international organization, right?
That's an euphemism of that. This is disgusting.
This is disgusting as low as it gets. And they were like, what can we do? And so we started trying to look. Of course, there's a bit of a history of where people shut the internet, and that history is not good. Mubarak shut it down. He was gone, right? Every other country that was part of this Middle East Arab Spring that tried to shut the internet, even Gaddafi shut the internet down. So let's not get that, but what I'm trying to say is that there is a history within the alternative media scene, as we were talking, the independent media scene, of people going to give support for struggles that were faced by a regime that cut the internet.
I just want to, when we do comparisons about what the government of La Republique does to its citizens, and we compare them to what really independent governments do with their citizens, I have a problem there because, see, independent governments who shut off the internet sometimes do it to actually save their citizens. Because if students are communicating and causing riots, right, a government can temporarily shut the internet in order that these students shouldn't cause these riots and hurt each other or cause some damage to society, to the society that they all are vested in or invested in. You know what I'm saying? But the government of La Republique, like we've been talking about trying to wipe us out, they shut down of the internet. They pretend. In fact, they come out and speak like legitimate governments. Meanwhile, these are representatives of French colonizers.
I totally agree. There's no debate.
And so the shutdown of the internet was not for any benefit to Ambazonian citizens or students or anything. It was to protect the vicious act, the colonial. It was to prevent the exposure on how they managed to remain colonial masters in the 21st century. Because the French are the only colonial masters who are still running around in Africa. And people wonder how they do it.
Well, that's so true that even maybe if one were to doubt the words of ordinary citizens, one would not doubt the words of Kenneth Kaunda, right? Kenneth Kaunda is one of the most renowned African leaders and who became president of Zambia and who is respected in a lot of circles for his history fighting for the liberation of Africa. Kenneth Kaunda, in the book Guns and Gandhi, written by the African-American activist who spent a lot of years in Ghana and a lot of African countries helping build education and other things. In the post-colonial era, he said to Kenneth Kaunda in the book Guns and Gandhi, he said, so after all these years, me and you have been working to build Africa, education and everything, but the continent is falling apart. We still have high HIV numbers. We have all this crisis all over the continent. Don't you sometimes feel like there's a devil hunting Africa?
I'm going to... Yeah, go,
and Kaunda answered, there is a devil hunting Africa, and that devil is France.
I was going to say that Africa can never work together because half the the population and have the representatives of the populations represent a foreign government.
That's correct.
Because all the presidents of these francophone countries,
yes,
who are appointed by the French,
yes,
or there by their blessing,
yes,
when they go to the AU, or it's AU, right?
Yes.
When they go to the AU, they're not representing the interests of the African populations.
That's
In
correct.
fact, I have said this before, that the only way that some African countries will move forward and then maybe be able to drag others or help others free their own countries is for the independent countries in Africa to have a different grouping that's different from the AU. Because in the AU, you have all these French vassals who come in there, and no decision can really be made that benefits Africans the way EU members go and make decisions that benefit all of them.
That is very true, and there have been some opportunities, right? Like the West African Association, Association of South African countries. If you look at the way they have, because unfortunately for us, most of these francophone countries are in the West African coast.
In West Africa.
West African coast. Now, when you look at,
do you know why? Do you know why they're in West Africa?
No.
Well, I took an African history class, and it kind of gave me a little bit of information on that. The whole reason why France is mostly in West Africa was because those are the parts of the world that's the part of Africa that had a lot of mosquitoes, and the British did not want to be, so they moved more towards East Africa that had a lot of that was more temperate climate, and so gave France what was not the best part of Africa.
Yep. I see mosquito help try to save us, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say unfortunate, because and you may not like this because colonizers are colonizers, but I don't want to say all colonizers are the same, because only the French are still colonizers in Africa today. And I think our people are the most qualified to speak on French colonization in Africa. Because
we are on if there's a ladder of how Africans have been oppressed by the French, we are in the bottom of the ladder, right?
Well, we are colonial subjects of their colonial subjects.
That is correct. And
but I think the other but here's where I was coming. Here's what I'm trying to say, that we Ambazonians, we were really a free people. In fact, we came one step away from having our independence. Because in 1958, the British had already prepared us for independence. They had written our constitution, orders in council, until Frontier came and took over government in 1959, and had a good relationship with the UPC.
Yeah.
And so that's when the British said it's not going to happen.
Yes.
So we were one step away from independence, a very educated population, and then we were thrown back into a colonial empire. And so we came into this colonial empire not very, very clear, educated, progressive
point
people.
Of reference. Yep.
Yes, and I was saying in one of the shows that when we came in, we expected these people to be like us.
Yep.
It took us like 10 years to realize that they're not like us. Then we said, well, let's see who can help them be like us. It could have taken us like 20 more years to realize that we cannot help them, that while we're trying to be human beings working with other human beings, they were looking at us like people that they should colonize and wipe off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Then we spend another 20 years with SDF trying to democratize them. And obviously, they end up swallowing everything and you realize that immediately after 1992, after Frundi, after SDF,
yep.
I think it seems to me that there was a more doubling of efforts to hurry up and finish us.
I wouldn't doubt that. That the whole issue about the health issues and using health using HIV like a weapon against
yes, people. And some of the vaccinations that
came after that
girls were saying they were running away
issues.
From.
Exactly.
So they have been a
concerted effort
to get rid of us in our land.
That's correct.
And so these students taking those pictures, they put them up, and the world
could see evidence.
There was a time when they thought La Republique du Cameroun only had it was a French-speaking country. I think the world finally learned that 20%, 20%, let's go with the 20%.
Yes.
That 20% is English-speaking. That's not a small population.
That's correct.
But I think we're larger than that.
I totally agree. There's no question.
So they shut off the internet. It took them. Look, I was excited that you were coming to talk because there's some issues of that internet on the ground.
Yes.
And so when I was able to get you to come, here's the beef of my whole thing. So they shut off the internet and then they put it back on.
Yeah.
I want you to explain what the internet was before they shut it off. And when they turned it back off, I don't think they turned it back the same internet that they shut off.
No, they did not.
So what was the internet that was existing before they shut it off, and now that they came back and installed it, what's
the difference?
Yes.
So before they shut down the internet that our people in our territory were using was the internet like everywhere else. Which means if you have your internet service provider, which is a company that provides the internet, that company has a right to buy access to the main backbone of the internet from wherever they want. All they needed was to get a license in Cameroon to open an office and to be able to build local antennas to provide services. And so what that meant was that anybody that had internet in our territory in Ambazonia was able to get on the backbone of the internet through any route that they want. Basically what that meant is that if you call MTN and you were trying to send something on the internet on a page that was in the United States.
You want to post to Facebook.
You want to post to Facebook. MTN machines would figure out the fastest way to get your post on Facebook. So if it occurred to them that, there's everybody's awake in Cameroon right now, and we cannot go through directly to the US, but everybody's asleep in Japan and all the lines in Japan are open, the routers would just route the traffic through there. And so everything was dynamic. The computers figured out where was the fastest way to get the information from point A to point B. That's the internet. That's how it works in the majority of places around the world. Now there is something known as the Chinese firewall, which is named the Chinese firewall because China is the first country to implement it. And APC, the Association of Progressive Communications, during my exchange with them when the internet was down in the territory, they said to me, listen, with all the pressure that we're putting on this government through both their own network and their own allies, they didn't know the details of our struggle, but from their principal position of you can't cut people from the internet when we're trying to add more people on the internet, they said, listen, it looks like they're going to put it back, but this time they'll bring it with the Chinese firewall. So what is the Chinese firewall? The Chinese firewall is basically the way China uses to control communication in and out of China. And so suddenly, people in the southern Cameroon who could go to the internet, if they called the internet before they called to post something on Facebook, their communication sometimes didn't even stay in Cameroon. It left Cameroon immediately and went to Nigeria if there were more open lines. That means that all companies that had a license now to operate in Cameroon after they put the Chinese firewall, all their communication must pass through a particular machine before it gets out of the country.
That's controlled by the government.
That's controlled by the government of Cameroon. Or if it's not controlled by the government of Cameroon, have access to it.
Okay.
Now, the fundamental problem with that so-called Chinese firewall is that it's able to link your traffic to you, which is not the way it should be, right? The internet should not be like that. That's very inefficient. If I have to link your traffic to you, that would be like the old telephone line. That means everybody has to have his own telephone line, right? But that's not efficient. Before, what you would do is you have a few lines. The internet before, you had a few lines, but you have many more people who want to use it. And what you would do is you give the line, somebody uses it. When the person is no more using it, you give it to another person, the same line.
Okay.
But now with the Chinese firewall, you try to tie a particular line to a particular individual so that when something wrong comes through that line, you know it is this particular individual that's responsible for it.
All right, let me see if I understand this.
Yes.
So before the internet shut down,
yes,
internet, if you wanted to post something online, on your Facebook page, for example, you take a picture, you want to post it online, you post it, and your telephone company will be the one that decides how it goes up.
That's correct.
The government had no hand to it. It didn't go through any particular channel where it could be monitored.
Yes, it did not.
All right? So it was so you can post, but it will never be traced back to you.
That is correct.
So after the internet shut down, for 90 days.
Yes.
Well, is that what they were doing for the 90 days?
I want to think that's first. I think they panicked. They didn't know what to do because they were totally taken. They were surprised at the way our public handled it. I think they have convinced themselves for so many years that we're backwards that they tend to believe
that we're Anglo-fools.
That we're Anglo-fools, and they started believing their lie themselves. But I think in that period, in that 90 days period, I am suspecting one of their many advisors from Paris came up with the idea that, okay, we're going to make a new rule, right? If you are an internet provider in Cameroon, then your traffic must pass through our firewall, which is the Chinese firewall.
Okay, so now the way I understand the Chinese firewall is instead of routing your traffic information anywhere, it has to come through this bottleneck here,
owned by the government. Yes.
Owned by the government.
Yes.
And if you post a picture, so can they come to your Facebook and see a picture there and be able to trace, or how do they do that?
So in the past, right? So basically, in the past, you'll be able to. It wasn't possible to be able to trace that because once I got my license to operate in Cameroon, I did what I wanted to do with my traffic. Most like MTN is all over Africa, right? So MTN servers in Cameroon would decide, oh, the servers in Nigeria are faster to handle this traffic. So the traffic comes, it just gives it to the one in Nigeria without anything. But now the Cameroon government is saying, MTN, if you have to operate in Cameroon, your traffic from within Cameroon must pass through the server. Now, how can they trace that? One of the ways they use to trace that is they use tracers, which is basically like putting a particular ID for everybody, just like everybody in Cameroon has a particular cell phone number that you need to call that number for that particular telephone to ring.
Yes.
Now, you have to do that to telephone because you want only one person to use the same number.
Right.
But in the internet, you don't need to do that because anybody posts picture. What is the difference? But now, that's what you try to do. You try to tie. They are called IP addresses. That's the name they are called. Those numbers. They're almost like telephone numbers for internet traffic. You try to pin an IP address to a particular ID, somebody's whether it's their telephone or their house computer supply resource. And so that by that way, if somebody posted something on Facebook, some video or whatever, you are able to look at the logs of that firewall, that Chinese firewall. You are able to say to a Chinese firewall, who posted this video? And the Chinese firewall will say, Ambe posted that video at 2 o'clock last night from this time to this time. That's when he did that. That was done by Ambe. And then now they can now just go and arrest Ambe as an individual, right?
Now, do they go to MTN and MTN will give them your address, or how do they trace you to your home?
There are several ways to do it, but the fundamental problem is to tie that communication to somebody.
Yes.
Once
and then you can get that person.
Getting to that person is second.
It's just logistics. Yeah.
Yes. But once you're able to tie that particular communication to somebody, you can get to that person, and that is a very devastating state of situation. That takes away from the internet the flexibility and the openness that wipes out the openness of the internet. Okay. It turns the internet basically to a tool for monitoring people. Yeah. And that's why.
Is there a way for our citizen to...
There is a way, and that's why, from my own point of view, I'm so excited that you gave me this opportunity to be able to communicate with our people, because this is an opportunity for us to respond in kind to our good friends over who decided that we're not good enough to be able to talk freely. There are very simple elementary technologies that we can use. I mean, there's a vast network of technologies. We don't need to bother about some of them because they're not applicable to our society.
So we can actually make that firewall obsolete.
Yes, and the way to make that firewall obsolete is that there's something called virtual private network, which is what is most applicable for our people. It's called VPN. Okay. What VPN does is that it encrypts communication between two ends. Okay. So most VPN servers, Cameroon does not own many, but most of them are out somewhere in the world. And so if you install the app, the VPN app in your phone, which is the way most Cameroonians use the internet, once the app is on, it encrypts the communication from your phone and your VPN provider. And so every time you do something on Facebook, the firewall that is between you and your VPN provider, so you have your phone, your communication here, you have the firewall, and you have your VPN provider over here.
The VPN is a service provider.
It's a service provider.
Yeah, like MTN.
Like MTN too. Okay. But they're out of Cameroon, they're not in Cameroon.
Okay.
And then you have Facebook, right?
Okay, so you're saying there's an app, there's an application which you can download into your phone,
and then
when you make your call, it goes somewhere else.
Yes,
and gets scrambled somehow.
It gets scrambled when it is passing through
the firewall.
So the firewall looks at the firewall cannot see that Ambe is posting a video on Facebook anymore. The firewall sees that Ambe is calling his VPN station. That's all the firewall can see.
Yeah, which everybody calls their
VPN stations. They are being called, and it's a little risky to go arrest Ambe on the assumption that if he calls a VPN station, that means that he's doing something fishy. And that's one of the core ways.
But there's really no proof.
There's no proof. You can't really tie.
And the more people who
the more it even becomes more
just
confusing.
Yes. Okay.
And so that's what a lot of activists in China use, and that's what our people can use. The most popular one right now, I mean, these are very expensive services, but there's an open source, like you were telling me about Indymedia. People who worked in Indymedia to provide ordinary technology, they're also working on VPN. And there's one that they developed, it's called Bitmask, BITMASK.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's in the App Store in most Android phones.
Okay. So this for Android?
That's for Android.
Okay.
It works mostly for Android.
Most of the phones back home are Android. They don't use...
maybe a few people have iPhones, I'm not sure, but even if you have an iPhone, the folks at Bitmask,
which they will have one for
Indymedia type people, they are working now on a version of that for iPhones.
So this Bitmask is mostly for Android?
For Android, yes. Okay. It is for Android, and some people use it even for their computers. For people in our territory who access the internet through their computers, they can also use it on their computers.
And it will mask their computers.
It will mask their communication between one and what the Chinese firewall will be seeing is that the guy is calling his VPN. There's nothing I can do. And not only are you calling your VPN, the information is encrypted.
Yeah.
There's one thing, the regular internet, the information is not encrypted. You can literally sniff its call.
Okay.
You can literally sniff packages. You can grab packages from somebody's connection and you sniff. And that's what they're hoping to do.
Okay.
That since people don't know that the Chinese firewall is there, they can sniff packages that are coming out of people's phones as they try to access the internet.
Okay.
But when you have a VPN on your computer, on your phone set, the first thing it does is it encrypts, it scrambles the communication. Okay. So they can't even see what's inside it.
Okay. So we have the
Bitmask.
Is there another one, or that?
There are a lot of them. I mean, the biggest one.
This one is free of charge.
This is free of charge. That's the most important thing. So if you install Bitmask on your phone, it will ask you to create a login. Okay. And this was built by Indymedia people, right? This is not some company. This is technology activists building infrastructure for activists to use. Okay. So it's just the same way you sign up to get a Google email account or Yahoo email account. Okay. The same way you sign up for Bitmask, but because it is intended to protect you, they don't want to keep your information either. They don't want to be arguing with other people. No, it's him, it's not him. No. So all what they want is a login and a password. They don't want, if you want to open an account in Yahoo, you need to say your name, your address, blah, blah. No, they don't want all of that. They don't care for that. They just want...
You can tell that was developed by activists.
That's correct. That's correct. And in fact, Bitmask is running through a couple of servers. So when anybody downloads it, it will ask you which one do you want. One of them is called Carlinks. The other one is called RiseUp.
But does somebody need to worry about that, or
they don't need to worry about? I would just advise people that when they log in, I would advise them to select. When they select the choice, they should select Carlinks. The reason is because CALYX, like X-ray. Okay. Yes. So that will give them 4 choices. RiseUp is very useful right now, but the problem is that it's overwhelmed. There are so many people, activists all over the world using RiseUp, that the traffic that RiseUp is dealing with is too much.
The 15 or how many million Ambazonians are all activists now.
That is
so they need to go
to Carlinks because
these are life-saving.
They are. I mean, the activists all over the world, whether from Russia to China, are using these things. They are using this VPN. In China, if you are an activist in China, with all the risk and all the situation, you have to use a virtual private network to be able to communicate with people out of the country if you don't want to expose yourself to a situation where you cannot manage. And so these VPNs are becoming like standard ways of self-protection. It's part of the so-called package of what we call internet self-defense package. Okay. There are other technologies, we don't need them, but people who care can look at them, like Onion. What Onion does is the Onion server does an advanced thing of VPN. First it encrypts the communication, then it starts bouncing it all over the world. That's why Onion is a little slow. but it is safer, right?
Okay.
So first, if the Cameroon government want to chase somebody on Onion, it's a very funny, nice, good cat and mouse game to play. Because if you're in Cameroon, Onion can show that no, he's in China. That person who posted that. Oh, you're looking for that video. Oh, the person who posted that video posted it from the United States, from China, from some weird corner of the world, because it bounced the communication.
It's moved it out. It doesn't even come out of Ambazonia. It comes out of
some other different corner of the world. But Onion is slow. I think the most popular thing right now is Bitmask for two reasons. One is that the activists who wrote it, they like put their last underbelly energy into it to make sure that people can get the possibility. It's very important for us to keep the internet open. We cannot risk making the internet become something that is at the access of the powerful and the strong, and then exclude the weak. It is the first time in the history of humanity that we have a communication channel that allows ordinary people to be able to express themselves like our people just did.
Yes. Which is incredible.
Yes.
Now, Ambazonians have established their own television.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that you can establish their own internet through people like you?
Yes, there is the possibility. There are multiple do-it-yourself possibilities for what we call mesh networking. During the time when the internet was taken down, we were a little late, but I know that the word had gone out to the territory that people should download and install FireChat, right? And I know that a lot of people in the territory downloaded and installed, but they didn't know what that means and what to do with it. Now, FireChat, the good thing about FireChat is that if you have FireChat on your phone and I have FireChat on my phone and we are close to one another, our two phones can talk without going through MTN or whoever provider. And so the implication of that is that if you have 1,000 people in an area and all 1,000 people have FireChat, you have basically what you just created is a local internet.
Oh.
Because those people can talk, these phones can talk to one another, send text messages through FireChat, send pictures through FireChat. They can do a lot of things,
but they will not be able to send it outside the territory.
They will not, if one of those people in that group does not have access to. If one of those people, just one of them, not all of them, just one of those people have access to the internet, which sometimes you can never guarantee, even in a country like ours. In Cameroon, it could be somebody one person with a satellite connection to the internet. Then that is it. It's gone out. Then that information that is inside that FireChat is called mesh network because it's a local internet. Mesh because all these telephones are talking to one another in this small mesh. And so FireChat is a very good tool, especially now that the Cameroon government has allowed the internet back. If you couple FireChat with something like Bitmask, you just told the government to go to hell. The next time they shut the internet down, people in Ambazonia will still be on their own local internet. And then if activists like me and you or one or two people want to help, we don't need to, wait until Cameroon installs the internet back for us to put Bitmask. No, just 2 or 3 people need to go down there with satellite phones and hook those satellite phones to the satellite, and suddenly all the information in there is going out. That's what happened to Mubarak, right? In fact, the FireChat thing was used in South Korea during the pro-democracy protest there. That brought down the last government there. The government shut the internet, but you had almost 1 million people in the city center, and all those people were communicating with one another anyway. And so some people were still able to send information out of that crowd. Not everybody was online. Mubarak's case was almost the same case, right? He shut the main trunk of the internet, but people were able to build a mesh network, and people just needed a few.
Let me ask you this. How far do you need the other person to be available before the mesh work?
So it depends. Now, thank you for asking before the mesh work. So for FireChat is building a local mesh, so the phones really need to be close. Like me and you need to be in the same room. But to build a mesh network, we don't need FireChat to build a mesh network. We just need to be able to place a few antennas with a Wi-Fi network. They would work like normal Wi-Fi. Right? So that would mean that if somebody is down the road and I have a Wi-Fi network and it's in a mesh network, that person, if they are part of that mesh network, they'll be able to connect. But
so it sounds like it's kind of hard to make a mesh network in the whole of Ambazonian territory. Because it needs that kind of proximity, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, but so we are not deluding ourselves that French Cameroon government is going to be nice to us. So the fact that we're not deluding ourselves means you start building the mesh and you continue building on it. And the thing with mesh is once I start building the mesh, I have a point, you have a point today, the next neighbor have a point. Think about it. Once the neighbor down the road has a point here, the neighbor after that does not need to talk to me. He or she just needs to talk to the person next to him.
Yes, and then the
mesh grows. Yeah. And so what looks like, it's too short the communication, a distance suddenly become extended, not because the first person needs to talk to the last person, the first person needs to talk to the
closest
person to them.
Yeah.
And that becomes difficult to even attack, right? Okay. Because you can, who would you break? You break Ambe, Eben talks to George. You break George, Ambe and Eben talk together. So we like activists, we have to start thinking about how we're going to be able to plant mesh network hot points back in the territory, which, like you said, we now have for TV, right? We could build a mesh network. I'm happy that we're able to talk about these things this way on your program, because then that basic awareness in the territory that this kind of thing is possible.
Yes.
When you show up and try to do this kind of, people understand that we've heard about that thing somewhere.
Yes.
And I think we can do that. We have the capacity to do it. The technology is very mature for doing this. I mean, some of the mesh network units that are around the world have grown pretty good, pretty solid.
Okay. This is really where technology and activism come together.
Thank you.
So apart from these mesh networks, there is really nothing we can do through satellite. There's nothing we can do.
There is a lot of things you can do through satellite. Yeah. There is a lot of things.
Because basically, the Southern Cameroon television works because
of satellite communication.
Right.
So the thing about doing satellite communication, the reason I focus less on it is just the cost.
Okay.
Right. But think about it this way. If you have a fire chat network in the territory, if everybody has a fire chat installed on all their Android phone, which is also an app on there, and they put them on, what that means is that we have little mesh networks in various cities. Now, what that would mean is that if there's something like Huge is one of the companies that is building satellite internet services, so in that case, then I don't need to build a whole internet service for the whole territory. I just need to send somebody in one city with a huge unit, just one person, they put it on, and they also join the fire chat network locally, right? It's a mesh network. Suddenly, all the content that is circulating in there, whether it is pictures or videos, they can also use their unit now to send it satellite-wise. Again, like I said, satellite is very possible. It's just a cost thing. Okay. And once you have a local mesh network, then you can you don't need to build a big satellite unit that everybody can use. You can just bring one unit that becomes the hot point through which the content in that mesh network gets out of the place.
Okay.
So
I know what our people waited for a long time for internet to come and start liberating. So maybe in the next 6 months, technology moves in that speed.
It does.
Maybe in the next 6 months, 1 year, somebody will find a way to say, what happened because La Republique du Cameroun is known now more for the country that shut internet off
than for all the
anything else. So it's going to make technology experts start thinking about how to.
People are working if you look at the bid mask on their website, you're going to see that people are not sleeping. Or if you look at FSF, that's the electronic how they call it. FSF, I don't know the abbreviation, but that's the activist foundation that kind of keeps together information about internet safety and security, internet self-defense. You can see that these things are speeding up every day because we are in this end of the struggle. There are people around the world who are also involved in different struggles that need to be able to communicate. And communication, as you know, like a communication expert, is a central core of any struggle, because if you are unable to communicate with your people, then suddenly everybody is isolated, atomized, and that's the best way to oppress the people.
Which is what La Republique has always done.
Yes.
They've always made sure that we don't have any leadership, so that we're not able to be controlled as a group.
Yes.
And that's why even with our television, we can start talking to our people.
That's correct. And
start giving some information.
That's why there's a big shout out to the folks who made the TV happen.
Yes,
those
absolutely.
Guys, my hat to them,
Absolutely.
Because it just, in the beginning I couldn't quite appreciate the impact, right? I'm amongst some of those people, whom when the conversation was happening in the background said, that's a little bit of waste of money. Maybe we should send it down to move people around the territory. But once it got in the air, you're like, Oh my.
Yes, and they're very smart the way they do it.
Yes, yes.
Let me ask you, I'm sure because of what has happened, you're thinking about the struggle has changed. Because when we used to do it 10, 20 years ago, we were mostly talking to ourselves and mostly knocking at doors where people were asking you questions, a lot more questions, and the answers, they were not believing them.
Yeah.
So with what has gone on and the way our population now is it's involved. Where do you think we're going, and how long do you think it will take? Is there the leadership right now leading our people?
I think that we've crossed the line. That we if we are able to manage that resource that our community has given us, we will never go back. I think my understanding of political process, whether it is the Irish Republican struggle, whether it is the Chapa struggle, struggles around the world, most struggles go through fundamentally 3 stages. There's a first stage where the oppressor is oppressing you, and you run around the corner trying to let them leave you alone, and they just keep pushing until at some point your back is stuck to the wall and you can't run anymore for them to leave you alone. And at that stage, what you do basically is you lash out. We've gone through that stage. You just lash out and you try to reflect them. They say, oh, they have a government. You say, I also have a government. You're like, go to hell and everything. We've gone through that stage. After you go through that stage of the lash out, of the anger stage, that's the stage where people declare 50 different governments in exile and everything. After that stage, there's a stage where you realize, you know what? I need to fight this guy with my brains beyond just being angry, because being angry is not getting me anywhere that much. And then you calm down and you become tactical. That level, our people has proven that if you're a diplomat in Yaoundé, every diplomat has gotten the message that Cameroon government does not expressly rule our people. The typical definition of a government is that people decide voluntarily as a community to say, we're going to give some rights to you in exchange for you behaving yourself according to the rules we define. Our people, the defiance of our people have communicated to the world that this is an illegitimate authority over here.
So let me ask you, what stage are we in right now?
I think we're in the stage, we just passed the stage of anger. We have entered the stage of tactical thinking.
Okay.
So now we have to start thinking, okay, what makes Cameroon able to get away with what they are doing? Oh, they are soldiers. Oh, yeah, so they are soldiers. These soldiers, what would they do if they were not being paid, right? Because apparently the Cameroon government, knowing that the soldiers are the first people in the pay list in Cameroon government.
In fact, that's the only tool they have.
Thank you.
Which is why after the soldiers went there and accomplished, they killed some people, but they did not break the will of the people.
Exactly.
So that tool became blunt.
That is the thing. So the next thing is, now it's time for you to cut the pipes to your enemy. The main thing, we have to figure out how. So those of us who are out of the country, we have to see that it is our turn. The people back at home have done their part. Now it's our turn. What have they done? They have delegitimized the occupation in a very loud and prominent way. What are we supposed to do? We are supposed to make it impossible for the government, for that regime, to pay its soldiers. How do we do that? This is a regime that more than 70% of its budget is based on international aid. Where's that aid coming from? That aid is coming from countries where me and you and other Southern Cameroonians abroad are living. Some of us pay taxes, some of us have citizenship in these countries. And these countries have legal, diplomatic, democratic processes for us to be able to stop this kind of funding. Everybody came to these countries to do this. The Irish struggle, Irish people came to the United States as the most powerful country in the world to help pressure the British government to back off. And it worked. We can do it. The Cameroon government does receive funding from the United States. Now, there are a whole slew of laws in the books that we can use to put a kibosh to that and make it impossible for the Cameroon government to get funding from the United States. I can bet you my last penny that if the Cameroon government is not able to get any funding from the United States government, then we'll be able to put more pressure on the World Bank and IMF to make it impossible for Cameroon government to get more money without being able to change their behavior. And if
so it's not the French?
The French have been the big machine. Cameroon government is a small tweak in that machine. All right. So, for example, if you look at there is a law in the United States called the FARA law, that is the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which says that if you're living in the United States and you are lobbying the United States government officials to do your biddings, you need to register as a foreign agent. So if we go and look at, there's a registry, it's a public registry kept by
we
Justice
can
Department.
see who is lobbying for
We can see
La
who is
Republique.
lobbying for La Republique. Now, the strange thing is, if you pick up the lobbyists for La Republique, it happens to be the same lobbyists that are lobbying for Togo. It happens to be the same lobbyists that are lobbying for Congo. It happens to be the same lobbyists that are lobbying for Equatorial Guinea. It happens to be the same lobbyists that are lobbying for... So the question is, what is the thing? What is the commonality between all these countries? These are French neo-colonial regimes. So basically, the French are fronting their case here for these regimes. And so...
so the French are basically paying these lobbyists to lobby for these countries.
To lobby for these countries.
Which are their client
countries. So you have to think, and you have to understand, why is this so important to the French? Without these countries, there would be no France as we know it.
Yes.
Take, for example, France, the whole country is running on about 80% nuclear energy, 70% nuclear energy, right?
And that comes from Niger.
If you cut energy, in any civilization, they will go back to the Stone Age.
Yes.
Everything me and you do has something to do with energy.
Yes.
All of the energy of France is coming from Niger.
From Africa, basically.
From Africa, basically.
Yes.
Right?
Because they get their uranium from Niger, they get their petroleum from
Cameroon, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea.
Yes.
So now, if you are able to cut access to these regimes accessing the aid to which they pay the military, they are stuck. When you saw Mobutu on TV crying, he wasn't crying because suddenly he became a moral guy. Suddenly he couldn't pay the army. That was the beginning of his
unraveling. Let me say something, okay?
Yes.
The French can still have access to all these energy sources. They just need to do them legitimately following the market process. They don't need to go and try to kill the citizens of that country or impoverish them in order to get these resources.
I totally agree with you, but the question then is, why are they not doing that? Think about it.
It's not as lucrative.
It's not. Think about it. The entire French political class, left and right, have been benefiting from that. You have to understand that the entire French political class, right? So there's Areva, the country, today Areva, the uranium company that is mining the uranium in Niger. There is not a single uranium pit in France.
No.
Not one. I mean, Americans can argue that it is true we get all the oil from the Middle East, but we also get some oil from here by fracking. The French cannot argue that we get some uranium here, but we just get a lot more from Niger. So Areva, a French company ends up becoming the second biggest uranium trading company in the world. Now, if they are able to pay Niger people the regular price for uranium, it will make life better for Niger people, but the French boss will not get as much access and resource and this kind of violation, and it seems to be, from their perspective, cheaper to break bones and get their way than to be able to trade normally.
Let me ask you this. So Southern Cameroon's or Ambazonia is one little country fighting this huge giant. I think we've scored some goals.
We have.
What are our chances?
We have a big chance. There's one great leader in the East who once said the best way to kill a giant is not to try to chop his head off in the myth with a big sword, because the sword that you need to cut the head of a giant could fall on you and kill you. You kill a giant by multiple cuts. It's called 1,000 cuts, right? You bleed the giant to death. You don't try to chop their head. What we need to do as a community of fighters, we have the possibility, because the most important thing that the people need for struggle for their liberation is their determination and their commitment to organize themselves, right? We live in a world where other people have organized themselves and been successful. I mean, all of us now almost say, Vietnam. It's not a joke that Vietnam was able to beat the French, then also made life impossible for the Americans. It wasn't because Vietnamese got some new weapons from space. It was just the commitment and the organization and the setting up. And we have several possibilities to do that, because we have the extra advantage of history behind us to look at how other people did theirs. And secondly, in this era of the way things are evolving, like our people have been able to use the internet. People in the 60s didn't have the internet that time.
No.
Our people have been able to use the internet. We have to be able to just be consistent and clear-headed in what we're trying to do.
Yeah, another thing that we need to do though is to make sure that we have blue blood Ambazonians in charge of things, because I think one of the reasons why we suffered, like I told you before, if we did not have Foncha, who was a person of ancestry in La Republique, working with rebels in La Republique, would have had our independence. Okay, and then let me say something else. When I was at the University of Yaoundé, we used to have professors who were Anglophones, and we thought these were our own people. Yes. But when you went to talk to them, you finally realized that no, he speaks English, but he's Bassa or he's Bamileke, and that's partly why they had all those. So we've had different people representing us. Yeah. So we need to be careful. Yeah. We need to start getting our own people representing us. And this really means that we ask upfront, who are you, where are you from? We do all that research. We vet. In the United States, they call it vetting. Totally. So we need to be organized. Just like you're saying, we need to be organized.
Yes.
Because we have seen
the
results. What the lawyers...
That is it.
Look at what the lawyers organized did.
Yes.
And the challenge that it was not even Ambazonia that brought this. It's
the lawyers that led this. That's correct. And in that organization, right, like I was talking about multiplying the courts, there are other lawyer organizations in the world, law organizations in the world, right? In the United States, in Britain, in France, and in Europe. I do not think those lawyers in Britain and in the United States and in Europe, they are happy that they pay taxes to governments and that their tax money gets given to a regime that is brutalizing lawyers there. They are not happy about that. And so we, like activists, we need to be able to connect, get our lawyers representative to be able to network with lawyer associations out of the country. That is one front of the battle, right? Then the same thing with our teachers. Our teachers union leaders back in the territory, we should be able to connect them with teacher union organizations here in the United States. I don't think as a teacher in the United States, I have students that I teach in my program. I don't think other teachers here are happy to pay taxes and their tax money be used to fund a regime that brutalizes teachers over there. That is opening another front. We need to be tactical enough, open every front, teachers to teachers, lawyers to lawyers, journalists to journalists associations. That is the kind of, like you were talking about, organizing. That's the kind of leadership we want. Group community leadership, not necessarily one big guy being called the new president of Ambazonia in exile or whatever. That is fine if it gets to the point where our public, our community think that is necessary for the symbolic or the central articulation of our purpose. But at this level where we have just broken the back or breaking out of the fever of the world always thinking it's just a bunch of activists talking, but now people understand that these communities have had it. We need to be able to open all these multiple fronts so that when it's not only me and you who are activists talking about our rights, it's about lawyers in the United States saying we refuse that our tax money and our government support a government that violates lawyers. It is journalists in the United States saying, and the way they cannot do that in the blank, we need to make those connections between our organized labor leaders and the leaders abroad.
Let me say why what you say makes a lot of sense. Agobala graduated from Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, when he was already Notre Dame raised a lot of hell. And in fact contacted a lot of international organizations to make, and I think it definitely did temper the way La Republique wanted to treat that particular prisoner.
Yes.
But I've heard you mention you haven't mentioned some of the organizations that our people have been going to all their life, like the UN, especially the UN and all that. What do they have a role to play?
The UN has a role of public relations to play, but what we are fighting is not the UN game. At this point, if we go to the UN, they're just going to run roughshots around us.
No, but the UN was responsible for what happened to us.
I understand that is correct. I think
that's what our people think. So I want to see.
I agree. The UN was responsible for what happened to us. But what is happening to us?
So they are not part of the solution.
The UN is a very small sliver of the solution, but it should not be the focus of our energy. The point is, the UN is an organization of members. These members have interests that brings them together. And one of the games that is happening in the UN is that you have a member called France that has a lot of puppets sitting there that vote according to the interests of France, not according to the interests of the people they pretend to represent. You have to
not in interest of justice.
Of justice. For example, when the UN tried to pass the anti-apartheid resolutions at the time, there was a country called Congo. Gabon that voted against, right? I don't know how many Gabonese were for pro-apartheid.
No.
The problem was that there's a regime in Gabon that was part of the French ability to sabotage the system.
Yes.
And that is why for years apartheid South Africa supposedly did business with Gabon. But nobody is being diluted. It was the French that built the nuclear bomb for apartheid South Africa so that they could use it to insist being in power. So the UN has a role to play, but it cannot take our energy. We have to understand the battle that is going on is the battle for other human beings around the world to accept and commit to defending our right to be treated like humans.
Which is why you want all these other professional organizations to create links with all of these other organizations.
That is correct. That is far more important than going. When you go to the UN, what are you going to do? You're going to talk. They're going to put you at most maximum. They'll put you with some undersecretary, right? France.
In fact, like you said, it's a member organization, and so if you're not a member, you're not even going to. You're not enter that Njangi house.
Thank you. And that is what we are saying is we're going to that Njangi house just because that Njangi house was in the beginning involved with something that is now affecting us. Like Mimondo once said, for anybody to tell us that our oppression is somehow based on some legitimacy, it's like to tell a slave that you were sold into slavery by your great-grandparents, shut up and follow the laws which your great-grandparents signed up to. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. We cannot allow the UN to be hey, it is part of the propaganda, okay? If the UN if the moment comes when the UN has to talk about our issues, they will talk.
Yes,
but the last time I checked, the real problems that are happening in the world, Palestine, Israel, and all those, the UN is just part of the propaganda front. The real happening is happening by people negotiating from those countries directly where necessary through other more important countries where necessary. And so we should be able to mobilize the public in the countries that have the wallet, the economy, that have the money. We live in a world where power seems to be very money driven. We need to be able to mobilize those societies to stand in our back. And the way to mobilize them is not just to broadcast our information and hope that somehow in their dining rooms while they're having their meal, they're going to look and be like, oh, we need to go support those people. No, it's a face-to-face organizing thing.
Yes.
You have to find common ground. Me and you can broadcast our struggle on US TV and on US newspapers for 1,000 years. It's not going to change much.
You need to meet with somebody and get them vested. They ask you their questions. You answer the questions. You look eye to eye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's true.
Having said that, I would say that the fight primarily is the fight of the people of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia.
They have.
And so you're just saying, this is your fight. You can get other people to give you a hand.
Yes.
But primarily it's your fight.
It is.
And it is the people of Ambazonia,
yes,
who with their sweat and their effort have brought the fight this far.
That is correct.
And they just need to keep doing it. And if a helping hand comes, great. Yes. But if it doesn't, we are winning.
Yes,
you having results fighting back.
That is correct. We don't have a choice, right? We don't have a choice. I reject the notion. That's why somebody called me. And did somebody call me, or I was talking to you, and you told me about the recent news? Oh, they just appointed 40% new DOs. I would tell all the DOs from our territory, people who were appointed from our territory, as part of those DOs, to install their own VPN in their phones and leak all the documents that come their way, so we understand exactly what the enemy is thinking. We are not going back.
No, but we don't need our DOs to be appointed by a foreign government.
We don't, and so any DO that's appointed is seeing himself like part of a battle. They should not see themselves like part of the regime.
It is really funny because these people need to know. Like I said, we came one step to independent. We're people who have governed ourselves before.
That's correct.
We had 100% of our DOs.
By us, yes, correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
So when you come and give us, unless they keep thinking we're stupid, we're not.
Or they keep thinking that they're gonna get away with it. Or they keep thinking that, we break a few knees, we give them 20%, we give them 40%. They're going to say, well, we now have 40% before we had 10%, and that's okay. Our people have proven that we are not that stupid. And I don't think that was a brag for our people. I think what should happen, or what will happen, watch me. What will happen is that some of those people that they have appointed are going to be the people that will be leaking the documents about the next plan that they have in their pocketbook, about the next plan that they are planning, about where they are planning to do stuff, about the evil things that they are planning to do. And those documents and that information will give us the kind of clarification evidence that we need to put in front of our foreign allies and friends to understand that what is at stake here is bigger than just a small territory, as the French like to describe it, 20%.
Yes, somebody said that Enam is where they create the drones that go out and rule. So you're telling me that the Ambazonians who went through that drone creation, it would not be effective?
You have to remember, those Ambazonians, before they went to the drone creation,
they had this thing.
They had this thing. Most of them grew up in the same place me and you grew up, and most of them heard about WADA, about CDC. Some of them, their parents even work on CDC and said, when we were growing up, CDC was not like this.
Yes.
Most of those people, you can't take that out of them.
Yes.
Now, they are unfortunately, and I hate to say this, there are unfortunately some people who feel that it's too overwhelming to take upon themselves to contribute, and so they say, well, I'm just going to be quiet, silence. I'm going to take my money, I'm going to pay a few more people that, I'm going to contribute to this struggle. I'm going to pay the school fees of a few more Southern Cameroonians, or Ambazonians as I prefer to call it. That will help something. Again, I prefer to call it Ambazonia because that doesn't get the confusion of, it's the south of Cameroon or the west.
No, it is Ambazonia. I think a lot of people have
appreciated the implications of that. So
and the patriot who brought us, who did that research and brought that to us, is a real patriot, and he's paid dearly for it.
God bless their soul.
Yes, and we have more of those people. We are going to be free.
We are,
because one of the reasons why they're trying to suppress us is because they are aware that the only creative force in that territory is the humans.
That's correct.
And so we will go down or rise by our own weight.
Evolution. I totally agree. Totally agree. And and I have to say, I am very, very proud to be from Ambazonia, because what did our people just illustrate? The resilience of the human spirit.
Yes.
You understand? And so we are a symbol, an illustration of the fact that there is something in the human being beyond just an instinctive animal whom you can hurt just by hurting them, that will convey to them to kind of, Pavlov kind of programming of a human. You can beat them until they'll be in the corner. No, we just illustrated that we're beyond that.
Yes.
We can bypass that. We think enough to be able to bypass the threat of pain and the threat of, abuses, to be able to stand up for what we believe is a fundamental right.
I want to declare this, okay? Since we talk about fight, and when you talk about fight, you talk about numbers.
Yes.
I think the news that was created here tonight is that we are actually larger than the 20% that they say we are.
Yes.
And I think the logic, you trace it from 1960.
Yes.
In 1960, we're 800,000. They claim to be 3 million.
Yes.
And so I think we are in a better situation to grow faster than they have been.
Yes.
And so they can't come and say now that somehow we're 20% and they are
80%.
And they are 80%.
But that is that is the typical colonial playbook.
Yeah, that's
you reduce the numbers and then you pretend, because if they tell you that you're just 5 of you, right? And 5 of you vote, whereas really you're 20 of you, and they stuff the box with
it's not only that. I mean, the implications are so many.
They're very deep.
One is psychological. If you think that we're only 20%, they're 80%,
you're like,
oh my God, then let's not even try.
And even all your supporters, your foreign supporters, are like, well, you're at 20%.
You're 20%.
Find some way to negotiate with these people. You know?
And then when it comes to money, they take 80% and just give 20%. So only 20%.
You're 20%.
So it has a lot of implications.
That's correct.
And I think that our people are beginning to wise up.
That's correct.
And no, they've always been wise.
They just had tried to avoid.
And if La Republique had just been a little fair, I think they would have gotten away with it. But they went for everything, including our souls.
Yep.
The French have bought the minds of La Republique because they designed their education and trained them.
Yes.
We're not part of that. They cannot buy our minds.
Yes.
And I think that with people like you and other activists out, we'll continue to win. I really want to thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry for talking so quick with my excitement, but
no, and really that excitement is what is running through all our veins.
Thank you.
And I think that as more questions keep coming, and there's more, and keep thinking, because I think that the next time we call you here, you may we can have our own internet.
I think there are people working on this.
Yes.
That's the way I would like to say it. There are people working on fundamentally how to create what we call long-range mesh networks. Because if you said a long-range mesh network, you've changed the equation very dramatically.
Yes.
These are so-called mesh network hotpoints.
Yes.
Right? They're like Wi-Fi, but they're not exactly Wi-Fi. And the technology is there, and I think there are people working on these things. I think the exciting thing that the population has done, this deference of the public the last several months has made everybody to get into their toolbox and ask themselves, what role can I play in this?
Yes.
And we have a lot of brothers and sisters who are really good in a lot of things, including technology, who are spending time talking to other allies and friends and organizations that are interested in fundamentally allowing every people to be able to express themselves, how we can do this. What kind of long-range mesh network antennas are there that we can deploy in our territory? How many do we need to deploy in our territory to make it impossible for any person to shut down such a mesh network? How many satellite units do we need to be able to do, a pipeline size of data? Do we need to be able to be like, okay, we can afford this pipeline size of data, and we buy it and keep it on reserve and say, any day there is this, we can switch immediately to this unit and just keep stuff going. And the Republic is not going away just because of all this transformation, right? Until they really go away.
Yes.
Everything that they are doing is not intended like they have waken up and suddenly seen the day of light and realize how bad they have been.
Yes.
Everything they are doing is how to continue to figure a way to continue the oppression or the theft or the abuse, or to figure out a way to undercut the current resistance. So we...
Yes. I want to tell you something that I think La République knew that this day was coming, and the French knew that this day was coming.
Yes.
And that's why they never built the deep sea port in Victoria.
Yeah.
They didn't do some of the development. They did not allow the oil pipeline from Chad to come through Ambazonia instead of taking the more expensive cost through Kribi. That's because they knew that this day is coming.
Yeah.
And I think one of the good things that I've said is that our people have said the beginning of that end is now. That's
so true.
Yes, and we just keep doing the same thing. And another thing I want to agree with you that the sustained cut of internet, the longest in history, has definitely allowed people in that industry to be thinking, how do we solve that problem, rather than going to a dictator and telling them, please give them the internet, because that is not theirs to give anybody.
There is, and I'm going to tell you, baby, I don't. Basically, there was a long thread of conversation that happened at APC because of this. People started looking at what is out there, what kind of what would that mean, the long range, and it kind of stirred a pretty good conversation from the point of view.
And I'm sure people are working on that.
Yes.
And so time is not for La République.
No.
It's just a matter of time, and we'll have our country back.
I do believe that. Absolutely believe that. I don't. There are things in life that you wish and you hope for, but you know that reality might not be on your side. But this is one of these things where one day you're gonna hopefully stay back and look at it and be like, we lived through this.
Yes.
We saw the pieces of this come together.
Yes, and we came out to be way better people.
We can.
We had our independence as easy as it was going to come.
Exactly.
I want to thank you for coming.
Thanks again for having me.
And just keep thinking, and please keep your phone available, because after this show we may have more questions and we'd like to answer, and we're happy that we have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be on your show. And with that question, I'm going to be excited to show up anytime that you have time to talk about these issues. And I can assure you that, that the honor has been mine, to be able to be on the show. I know your work, right? You had the opportunity to talk a lot about you knowing me. I know your work, and it's a big honor from my point of view that I'm being invited to your show, knowing the quality of your work, where I've seen your work in different situations that definitely people like me are too paid it irrelevant to be able to be part of that crowd.
No, there was a time when most of the people we've spoken were history gatherers.
Yes.
Right now, we're looking for solution for people who have tools.
Yes.
And I was talking to you, and you were talking about internet. No, don't say I want to say it myself. You were telling me about computer programming that solves problems.
Yes.
Instead of Fortran, so I think I want to let you know that you're part of that we have a big project.
Yes.
And people like you and people like the people who have established the television stations, all the guys who work on the background, we need all those skills. And I can tell you what, that Republic, watch out.
And your work that is out there is definitely part of those pieces that are making all the moving parts come together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
God bless you, sir.
You too.